In most behavioral systems, repetition becomes inevitable once the conditions that produce a behavior remain stable. Persistence is not the result of weak control, it is the result of unchanged structure. Behavior does not originate from intention. It emerges from interaction between an individual and a set of recurring conditions. When those conditions repeat, the same response appears. The outcome is predictable because the inputs are stable. Variation disappears not because the individual lacks capacity, but because the system delivers the same configuration repeatedly. Unwanted behaviors often appear personal. They feel like internal failures because they occur again and again despite resistance. This interpretation is incorrect. The repetition is not caused by the individual. It is caused by the system continuing to present the same arrangement of cues, pressures, and constraints. The behavior persists because the environment keeps asking for the same response. Behavioral systems operate through exposure rather than decision. When the same situations recur, the same responses activate automatically. The system does not require agreement. It does not require belief. It only requires presence. As long as the individual remains inside the same configuration, the response continues to be triggered. This is why effort fails in these systems. Effort targets the output while leaving the input untouched. The behavior is treated as the problem. The conditions that generate it remain intact. As long as the system continues delivering the same inputs, the output cannot change. Pressure applied downstream cannot override forces operating upstream. Motivation has no governing authority in stable environments. It fluctuates independently of conditions. When motivation declines, the system continues operating. When motivation increases, the system remains unchanged. The structure does not respond to internal states. Outcomes follow configuration, not resolve. Behavioral persistence is reinforced by predictability. When a system reliably produces the same response, it becomes efficient. Efficiency does not imply preference. It implies repetition under identical conditions. The behavior feels entrenched not because it is chosen, but because it is continuously rehearsed by the system. The system does not evaluate whether the behavior is wanted. It does not register future goals. It does not register past intentions. It responds only to the present configuration. When that configuration remains constant, the response repeats, without negotiation. This explains why resistance feels exhausting. The individual attempts to override a system that has not moved. Each attempt increases internal strain. The external conditions remain unchanged. The behavior appears stubborn or resistant, but it is simply consistent. The system is doing exactly what it was set up to do. Over time, repeated exposure converts response into baseline. The behavior no longer feels situational. It feels like identity. This misattribution strengthens the illusion of personal failure. Even though nothing internal has changed, the system has simply remained stable long enough for repetition to appear intrinsic. When structure changes, effort appears to work. In systems where surrounding conditions no longer generate the same inputs, the repeated response dissolves without resistance. The individual feels different, not because they became stronger, but because the system stopped demanding the same output. The change feels sudden, because the constraint was invisible. This shift often creates confusion. The behavior disappears without struggle. The absence of friction is misattributed to discipline, or insight, or growth. In reality, the system no longer produces the behavior because the conditions that sustained it no longer exist. The disappearance was structural, not heroic. Persistence is not evidence of desire. It is evidence of exposure. Removal of exposure removes the response. The system does not miss the behavior once the configuration changes. It simply stops producing it. The illusion of personal failure arises because behavior is experienced internally while structure operates externally. The cause is invisible from inside the system. The response feels voluntary, even when it is not. The individual feels responsible for outcomes governed by conditions they do not perceive. Behavioral systems do not negotiate. They do not adapt to belief. They do not respond to intention. They respond only to configuration. Internal opposition does not register as input. Only environmental change does. This is why awareness does not reliably change behavior. Recognition does not alter input conditions. Understanding the pattern does not interrupt it. Insight exists alongside repetition. When structure remains fixed, knowledge accumulates. Outcomes stay the same. Personality does not override structure. Traits influence which responses activate under certain conditions. They do not determine whether activation occurs. The same individual produces different behaviors in different systems without changing internally. Consistency across contexts exposes this principle clearly. When behavior shifts across environments while the person remains the same, the difference cannot be attributed to character. It must be attributed to configuration. The system governs output, not the individual. Behavioral stability is not a character flaw. It is a system property. The longer a structure remains unchanged, the more stable the behavior appears. Effort appears ineffective because it is applied downstream. Structure operates upstream. Until inputs change, outputs remain locked. Resistance accumulates, leverage does not. This is why attempts to force behavioral change often intensify frustration rather than resolve it. The system continues delivering the same conditions. Internal pressure increases. The conflict is misdirected. Energy is spent where influence does not exist. No amount of internal opposition can neutralize a system that continues to generate identical inputs. From inside the system, leverage appears personal. From outside, it is structural. The persistence of unwanted behavior does not indicate lack of control. It indicates structural consistency. The system has not changed, so neither has the outcome. The structural impossibility lies in expecting different results from unchanged conditions.